Altbays.
Altbays.
Altbays. Altbays.
And we're live. Altbays Show brought to you by Altbays.nz. If you're watching us right now, it's because you are on YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel. That really supports the team. We are a podcast, so you will also find our shows on all the main audio platforms. Okay, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, all of them. And of course, social media. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Are you on TikTok?
No.
Not yet.
No. My children aren't.
Are they? I'm sure they are. Our media group has just released, well, not just, in January, we have released this beautiful thing here, Coramind magazine. If you're listening to us, probably you cannot see it. Well, that would be weird, right? But if you are watching us, you can see this beautiful cover done by Hannah Coleman Smith, local artist. Look at this, how beautiful. And it's a collaborative project. We got a bunch of cool people from the whole Coromandel and Thames involved to write and to share their artwork. So make sure to check it out. If you cannot get hold of a printed copy, people are going after them, which is pretty cool. You can find the online version and the audio version, because accessibility matters, on coramind.nz. And if you want to be part of the magazine, please reach out to hello@coramind.nz and we will have a chat. We would love to hear from you. This is show number 164. We're having a lot of fun. We have been doing this for 1 year. It's a cool thing that puts a lot of people together. So we really appreciate all your support. Okay, thank you so much. On my left tonight, I have the pleasure to talk to this beautiful German gentleman, Stefan Lindner. Hello.
Hello, my dear friend Leo. Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, very good. I'm very happy that you invited me, and looking forward to this talk with a very, very interesting person.
So show 52, right? Is that when you came to the Altbays for the first time?
I think 52.
52?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Very popular show. So if you are watching us right now, make sure to check out as soon as we finish show with Mr. Stefan Lindner, therapist,
counselor, and I think I pointed out a special word in the description for 52, soul activist.
Soul activist.
Yeah.
I love that.
Soul activist, yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You had some German friends and family coming for a visit. How was your heart after that get together?
Yeah, a bit in grief, yeah, still grieving a bit. It was good to see my sister, my brother-in-law, and a good friend of mine, 35 years, a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
They stayed here for 4 weeks, and it was lovely. They left today in the afternoon to Auckland, and tomorrow morning they were flying out. So that makes it possible to be here as well.
So you're on the roller coaster, with the emotions now.
I am.
Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we have the pleasure to talk to Mr. Mark Vette. Hello.
Yeah, great, Leo.
Vette.
Yeah, great to be here. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. That's so cool, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So we got a few titles there: Animal Behaviourist, Zoologist, Trainer.
That's right.
So there's a PN. What's the thing that comes next to Zoologist?
I'm an animal behaviour consultant, and zoology obviously was my original degree, and my master's degree. Mm-hmm. And so did my master's in sheepdog behaviour and genetics and wolf behaviour. Oh. And and I've gone on to, I do other things as well. And we'll no doubt cover some of those things as we go along. But
you've been on this journey for 40 years now. I thought you were 40.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah. No, it's actually 45 now. God, 45 years I've been ticking at it. Yeah, it's been a great love of mine, and there's nothing better than when you do what you love and love what you do. So it's been a great life, a great opportunity to work with animals at the level that I do, and people, and and that's really lovely when I can integrate, my Zen practice with my professional practice in animals. So that's
when you
a great thing.
when you started, did you already have a vision of like putting all these things together, or you
No,
started
not really.
small? You
Yeah, I mean, I was a practitioner from about 20 years old, so about the same time as I was doing my masters, I started Buddhist practice. So that was cool. So that, but I never for a moment really thought the two things were going to integrate and become, one guide the other effectively, which really is what's happened. It's been as I deepen my meditative and mindfulness practice, it deepens my ability to understand animals, to listen to them, to work with them, and and I've had the good fortune to, through my movie work, to work with all different species, from elephants to butterflies, so that's something I love as a zoologist is, the diversity of species, and always had a very inquiring mind as a young kid, and always out in nature digging around for snails and watching. In fact, we were sitting with the grandies the other day watching ecdysis or metamorphosis of a butterfly, and just little things like that. They've always had great deal of wonder and awe at those kind of things. And as I built and developed and my deeper understanding of the diversity of species, and my specialty is behaviour, is animal behaviour. So. I've been good fortune to work with some of the world's leading cognitive behaviourists, and did a TV show in England with one of the greats. When I taught the dogs to fly, that was all about his work actually, and which was dog cognition. And then my Professor Klinghammer was one of the great behaviourists of all time. He worked with directly under Tinbergen and some of the great German behaviourists, and it's I've had the good fortune to be guided by a lot of wonderful people, including Thich Nhat Hanh, and my spiritual practice.
Sounds like a fun life.
Yeah,
you're having fun.
Yeah, that's right. I am having fun. Yeah.
Just before we dive deep, because I feel like we're going to go deep very quickly here, Mr. Stefan, I just want to say a quick thank you to our dear friends from Slice Slice Baby from supporting our show. So if you're coming to the Coromandel, now is a good time to support local people. We got hit pretty hard by the recent weather events, so check them out at Slice Slice Babe NZ. Beautiful sourdough pizza.
Yum.
We're chatting here, and then we had some food, and then we're gonna have some more foods after the show. So check them out. Thank you. Mark, is it harder to deal with animals or humans?
Humans. That's not a hard
animals.
question.
So you bring me in, yeah?
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's why you've headed that way and I've headed the other way. Yeah.
For you, Stefan.
So maybe I need to mention you invited me as well because I'm a dog owner. I have a German Shepherd, 16 months old. And he's a lovely dog, great nature, and he will become the best dog ever, I promise. But
we'll make sure of that.
We'll make sure.
That would be nice.
Heading into puberty at the moment. So.
Yeah, he is. And this relation, I have actually in the moment 3 children in puberty.
Yes.
So my daughter Lily is 17, my son Tom, who is 14, and now my dog Walter, who is 16 months old.
Sack of a punishment, if you ask me.
And that is why I'm saying, it's maybe more challenging to have a relationship with a dog.
Do animals, I think a lot of people have an idea of that because you often see those funny posts of how dogs end up looking like us or we end up looking like dogs. But when it comes to personality, do they really pick up how we are?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think there's a little bit of, license there for people to, and people make themselves up to look like their dogs and all of that type of thing. But basically, it's really interesting that the relationship between a dog and humans goes back nearly 40,000 years. So, and that's a really critical point. So dogs self-domesticated themselves from the wolf, or the wolf self-domesticated itself into a dog, basically, by puppyizing itself. Basically, you can imagine the wolves hung around hunter-gatherer settlements back in those days, or started to. Those more confident wolves would hang around. They'd eat our waste. They'd eat our feces. They'd eat our scraps. And those who got closer and closer in slowly selected themselves effectively, became more friendly. The adrenals decreased. There's a thing called the neural crest in the early development that happens in domestication. And so all of the domestic attributes started to manifest. And the most important thing, of course, is what we did was we selected for friendliness. And so the friendlier they got, the more they became dogs, So dogs are friendly wolves. They're puppyized wolves. And so as that happened, they literally co-evolved and changed genetically from what they were. And so, for example, they have neurons in their brain that can detect human eyes, They can detect human posturing and gesturing, And you can compare that, for example, to chimps, who are highly intelligent, probably more intelligent primate, but they haven't co-evolved with us, so they don't have that rapport and that intimacy that we have in our relationship with dogs. And the oxytocin that's stimulated when we bond with our dog is at the same levels as the oxytocin, which is the love hormone, or the bonding hormone that we have towards our children and our family. So you can see what's happened is the collaboration between these two highly social species that have evolved friendliness as a way to survive, basically, and become and succeed better. So we're two species that have evolved the social brain into a very sophisticated organ, and in doing so, we've facilitated that kind of incredibly deep bond that you just don't get with anything else. And I've had close relationships with many species, including monkeys and primates and so on, and you never quite get that same rapport that you can have with a dog.
With the dog. Were there animals that were very hard to train or almost impossible to?
Yes, yeah. Well, cats, for example, are one of the most difficult. We train.
The cats team at home is like,
don't. I love cats. Don't say I don't love cats. But cats are ancestrally a solitary species. Come from Felis libica in Libya, in North Africa, and so they're a species, very adaptable species, but primarily they're a solitary species. So, but if there's a resource all found in one place, they'll gather in that, and they'll adapt and become social. They're highly adaptable. We talk about dogs having owners and cats having staff. It's a bit like the fact that they're very much in control of our behaviour, more so than dogs, who are much more collaborative and part of our extended family. Whereas, as I said, cats are more kind of, what can I get out of this a little bit?
Have you had a cat?
I still have a cat.
You still have a cat?
14 years, my cat Mio.
That's good.
So it's interesting to see how their relationship. My young dog Walter, German Shepherd, and now my old cat mate Mio. I moved around 10 or 11 times. Meanwhile, I'm here in Fitjanga, maybe a bit less. In the beginning, Mio was here when he was 6 months old and still with me. So normally we say cats are often more relating to the environment and stays. But I can move wherever I want. He's coming with me and he stays with me.
Well, the more you move, the more he'll do that too. If you adapt a cat to movement, then they'll move better. But we know from film cats, because when we train animals for film, they're very difficult to take on set. You've just got to be really careful. Right. When you've got a well-trained film cat, you move it regularly, a bit like show cats. Yeah. If you actually move them, they adjust, but they're very territorial, so they don't want to leave their territory.
And he's the boss.
Yeah. He'll be the boss.
Compared with Walter. Walter wants to play, but my cat is telling him off and telling him what to do. Yeah.
Well, that formative period, that 2 to 4 month period, is when you bonded him with the pup, and that's the time in the dog's life when they learn who their extended family is.
Right.
So one of the things we teach in Puppy Zen, for example, is to extend the bond of your dog to all the other species that they're going to have in their life,
Yeah.
particularly cats and particularly birds and so on.
Yeah.
And so when you do that in the formative period, they include them in their extended family. This is an attribute of dogs that wolves don't have, and so it's the ability to cross foster is really critical, and that's what they're doing. And of course, they just see that cat as just an extension of their family, and the cat sorts them out in early days, and they'll never forget it.
When we say intelligence, how do we measure that? Are we always comparing to humans? Are we always getting from the perspective of humans, or we measure animals among animals to say, oh, yeah, that one is more intelligent than the other one?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very good question, because intelligence is relative, relative to what you're adapted to and what your species is adapted to. So in true terms, we're very, human-centered in the way we see things and measure things. How are they in terms of their intelligence compared to us? But of course, their world's completely different. I mean, a dog's world is olfactory based. It's the sense of smell dominates their world, and of course they've got very different drivers and needs in their world. So it's not intelligent to to sit looking at your phone all day to a dog. That would be pretty useless, or a wolf. But nevertheless, we do use similar intelligence kind of measures when we're measuring, but the cognitive science around dogs is really evolved quickly. In the last while, we're starting to realise that they're much more intelligent than we thought they were. Because one of the experiments that was going on early is for example, comparing them to wolves, they seemed less intelligent than wolves. And but what it turned out was that they were looking to the humans for direction and help effectively when they're doing an experiment, So they're actually looking to you for direction. The wolf isn't, of course, looking to you at all for direction. And so a lot of their behaviour was underpinned by them trying to ask us to help them, and that's a very intelligent thing to do, when we started to realise it. And so then suddenly we realised what was going on and changed the experiments a little bit and saw, oh no, they're very intelligent, particularly in relation to work with humans, And so that's exactly what we're starting to find, is their intelligence is much, much greater than we thought. But each species has its own intelligence and related to their environment, the environment they grew up in and live in and have to survive in. And so it's intelligent to be able to hunt well, and to have really good navigation skills and to know where your partners are when you're cooperatively hunting. And so a lot of their behaviours do revolve around cooperativity, which is what humans' behaviours often revolve around too. So that's why their intelligence is very often very close to ours and very similar. And not in the kind of abstract kind of thinking. They don't use the same kind of level of concepts in the way they see the world. They're much more present moment. They live in the present moment, and that's something wonderful that they're really our teachers in regard to. Yeah.
How do you find training your German Shepherd, Stefan? How is that mission going?
Very good. But as someone who is working a lot, he is at daycare as well, 4 to 5 days a week. But he's there, trained well. But I do my training all the time in the late afternoon or over the weekend, and big walks, and it's very satisfying. And I discover as well. So he's teaching me so much and brings me back as well to my relationship with my inner child, and back with my relationship with nature. And he's showing me what he wants to do, and I follow him sometimes, or he has to follow me back into the bush. And we discover wonderful things together again, which I haven't done before since I'm here. Yeah.
Is it something common to struggle more to train a dog when you have a busy life, like Stefan is saying, and then he's taken to a daycare, and then the dog is like, okay, who am I listening to? Like, is that something that it could become easier depending on the situation, or not? It's always going to be a bit harder
it really helps to do things like daycare when you at work for significant periods. Dogs are a social species, and they live together in a pack. So when they're left by themselves, they're not so happy about that. They'll adjust and they'll adapt, and of course it's something you need to do when you train your dog, is teach to be separated and not suffer separation distress, which a lot of particularly over-attached dogs do. So the more you love the dog, often the more over-attached you make it, and the more prone it's going to be to separation distress, which is howling and barking and soiling and destroying, the property while you're away. So doggy daycare really does help that, to diversify its social experiences, to get other people working them as you should have, and so it's it is difficult with a work life like that, and it's probably the most important message there is the 2 to 4 month period is the formative period in a dog's life. That's when 80% of the brain wires up, So that 2 to 4 month period is literally the time you make and break your dog, and most people don't really realise that. Doesn't mean you can't fix it later if you know what you're doing, but it gets harder and harder. The reason that formative period's there, if you think of the ancestral wolf when they go hunting, when they hunker down in their whelping dens because they're a migratory hunter, of large prey over large distances, and so for 4 months of the year they hunker down for normally the dominant female to whelp and have her pups, and then by 2 months the pups come out into the pack and join the pack and integrate with the pack for the next 2 months. So that 2 to 4 month period is the time they learn who their extended family is, who their pack is. And so it's all about developing social relationships. So that's exactly what you should be doing with your pup. You get the pup at the same time, 8 weeks, and so at that time they're just starting that formative period very much. They've done a little bit with mum and the pack, the breeding environment, which is all good, but really the 2 to 4 month is the formative shaping period. So that's the time when we really want to get hold of them. That's what Puppy Zen's all about. It's about focusing on that formative period. Make sure you're socialising with lots of people, different age classes, different races, different types of people and cultures, different breeds of dogs and other species, cats, and so on. So that's your main job in that formative period, to broaden their social group, establish a healthy, friendly relationship with extended family and friends and people and animals. And then, of course, you're building your shared language. So you're starting to grow that command base, that language that you're going to use with them to call them when they come and to get them to sit and so on. So we establish all of that during that time. We do house training, we do bite inhibition and mentor bond and that type of stuff. So that's really critical to get those foundations in place in that first 2 to 4 months, and then you've got your teenage months ahead, and then it's a consolidation phase because as the dog goes into teenagehood, puberty, around about 7 or 8 months through to 18 months, then the whole architecture of the brain changes and the drivers that drive the dog change. And so you've got to be conscious that now we're in this phase, but like your teenage kids, and where they're climbing out the window and they're heading out to everyone else and they don't care about dad anymore. All that same stuff happens with the dog, and so that's the teenagehood, and then when they hit adulthood, then you've got other issues, more territorial but dominance issues, those type of things, and behaviour problems that come with some of the adult issues. So just to try and be conscious that your dog has, just like humans, stages in their life that you've got to deal with differently.
It sounds like there's a lot of observational work. You got to be observing. You got to be
exactly. Well,
watching the dog.
Yeah, you're right, because dogs are postural communicators. 90% of their communication is postural, so they're actually communicating to you through changes in posture, eye contact, orientation, approach, how big they're trying to make themselves or small they're trying to make themselves, dominant, submissive gestures. They also use vocal communication, and they use pheromonal communication, as well. And, of course, they have a whole raft of pheromonal and smell-oriented communication that we're hardly a party to because we've got such poor noses compared to them. They're kind of 1 million to 2 million times better smell than we've got. So another whole world, when you think about it. Dog can go into a room and tell you 3 weeks ago which way the person walked across that room, which seat they sat in, and probably what they had for breakfast. So they've got pretty amazing, olfactory abilities. So when you start to realise that, you realise when you're talking with a dog, communicating with a dog, they're reading you on all different levels, and including an energetic level, they can, that is subtle, and very, very, dogs are very good at that, as are most animals, actually.
Have you noticed that, Stefan, the energy?
I have. And coming back, I think one of the title here is Puppy Zen.
Puppy Zen.
Puppy Zen?
So
we're going to talk about the book soon for sure, yes?
You know that I'm into Zen and meditation, and I have a meditation circle doing practices at home.
Yes.
And I see when I'm really with me, content, and do my breathing, and take then my dog Walter out. He is listening. He is observing me. He is in the present moment with me. I'm in the present moment with him.
Yeah.
So we relate differently. So there is a flow of energy in us. I call it as well when I'm in this space, and I'm using this word often, I'm in my king energy. Yeah, a type of king energy from Carl Jung adapted. But so this energy where I can make decisions, where I'm clear, where I can be as well a tyrant, but that is the shadow side. Carl Jung called it the shadow side, but I'm trying to be on the bright side. Yeah, be a wise king and give direction and see where are risk and not. And my dog is trusting me then. So if I'm in this space, he's good on a leash. If I'm dreaming around and focusing somewhere else, he's pulling me over the street.
He's taking you for a walk.
So he's feeling where I am. He's observing me. He's communicating with me. He is in many ways sometimes
they're watching
more
your every
clever.
move, and they see you as a gestalt, a kind of the big picture. They sense your energy. They sense your compassion and your care for them, and so one of the things that happens, when you're deeply working with any animal, but particularly dogs and wolves, is they have mirror neurons like we have, So mirror neurons are neurons that allow us to empathise with other beings, be able to step into their shoes, so to speak, and feel what they feel. That's what empathy is. Compassion's an extension of that, to change that to, from self to other. So. But with dogs, they're very much they're very empathetic. They sense your moods very quickly. You'll notice if you're crying or if you're distressed, or you give off pheromones where they'll pick those up very readily, and respond. Depending on what your bond is with your dog. But all of those things. I'm writing 2 books, kind of. At the moment, one is Teenage Puppy Zen, which is to really spell out that whole area that people misunderstand, that teenage.
Write it quick.
The good news is we've got the videos already. The book's coming second. See the other way around this time. And the other one is the Mindful Trainer. Okay. And the Mindful Trainer is just what you're talking about. The more and of course you've got to have situational awareness for a dog, because a dog's living in a human world, not a dog world. And human world involves cars and dangerous things that dogs don't know about, and don't chase the cat and don't eat the sheep next door and so on. So our situational awareness is really critical as a trainer to identify risks that the dog. So you're thinking for your dog all the time, because it doesn't have the ability to understand some of those things. But when you build that shared language, which is what we do in Dogs Zen, we're building a shared language. And a shared language involves also the ability to read their postures, to understand their vocal communication, because that's very subtle too, and understand that they're reading you, and mainly by your postural communication. So we do a lot of work with all different people with regard to aggression, like posties and things like that. We get bitten by dogs. Big part of it's just learning how to read a dog and understand that your behaviour, the way you posture, is actually more important than what you even say, or but what you do physically is is already talking to the dog from some 200 metres away, or more.
Right.
And olfactory sense, they're reading you from kilometres away. They can smell you from 5 to 10 kilometres away, if you're downwind from them, if you're upwind from them. And so, you realise that we're dealing with an animal who's got a very broad and subtle sensory range that is way beyond what we live in.
And it seems my dog has a photographic memory. When I come out of a house and something changed in the environment.
Oh, yeah, change.
He sees that.
Yeah, that's right. They notice
Suddenly
change.
there is
quickly.
a car. And he is seeing his car
yeah.
around, parked somewhere. I'm not realizing it,
Yes.
but he's getting it.
He's
Something
already
is
picked
wrong
it up.
and
Yeah.
picked it up.
Particularly in the shepherds, because the German shepherds are a guard breed,
Yeah.
and we use them for police work. I've done a lot of trained police dog trainers, and so one of the things we're relying on the guard breeds, like the German shepherds in particular, is their very strong loyalty to you and build a very strong bond, and then can become very protective. In fact, you've got to be careful they don't become too overprotective, unless you've got a dog in police work or something. But basically, they're very vigilant, and they do. Dogs notice change. They've got about a 5 to 1 negativity bias too, so they're always looking at the risks, and so they'll always, first of all, go, well, it's not looking good, what's that, and so negativity bias puts them into sympathetic arousal, the adrenaline's pumping and they stack up, and so when they're stacked up, they're more reactive, and they're also out of learning state, so a lot of training is about getting, we do a lot of embodied cognition kind of work with our dogs, doing things. One, for example, the Zen down is instead of just the normal down that I teach a dog onto the brisket, I then teach them with the clicker, which is a really powerful tool, the clicker.
Yeah.
And this is the marker that I use when we're working, which is followed by a food reward. So what I'm doing when I teach the Zen down is I put them in a down, and then I get them to roll that hip just by luring. Roll the hip over, relaxes the dorsal muscle, activates the vagus nerve, which switches on parasympathetic arousal, which is what we're doing when we're meditating and we're doing those kind of things. And so same thing with the dog. If we can activate through changes in posture, changes in their nervous system, switch them into that learning state, that rest and digest state, which is absolutely fundamental to training, then you're away. You can then shape the behaviour, and particularly using positive reinforcer like a clicker. It's about 10 times quicker to shape behaviour. So once you've got those tools in hand and you've got the dog focused on you, you've built your bond through. I use a signature technique I call joining up, and that's a technique that I developed when I was working with wolves, and so it's a mimic of what they do to bond with each other. Obviously, we don't have tails and ears, and we don't walk on 4 legs, and we don't have their pheromones and so on. So what I've had to do is adapt techniques that build the follow response, which is a mammalian response. You watch the lamb go over the hill following mum, that's the follow response. So cultivating the follow response, cultivating the bond gaze, so eye contact, getting eye contact, click and rewarding when they're looking at me, and so I start to pair that up, and as I pair that bond gaze up, that activates oxytocin and dopamine in them, so that puts them into peak learning state, particularly when I'm trying to change behaviour, because dopamine and the other hormones that I'm stimulating when I'm doing that activate the rewiring of the brain, so actually bring together, all of the factors that we need to change and rewire behaviour, which is what we're doing when we're doing those kind of things,
Mark, when I was younger, and I think someone said, oh, this new breed, and then I started to understand that we could actually do that.
A new breed?
A new breed. No, when people say, oh, there's new dog. And then when I was young, I didn't have this concept in my mind that we were actually making dogs. And as I got older, I realized that even a lot of the vegetables and the things that we eat are all human.
Artificially selected.
So when it comes to an animal and to connect with all the work that you've done with yourself, like the consciousness and like being with yourself, like how what's your take on that, of like humans actually, because I understand we are the ones in charge, let's say, of the world, we are the dominant species I could put
In one
it
sense,
that way.
yeah.
So in one sense, absolutely, because I actually think that the animals are way more evolved than us. That's my take.
Yeah.
But so I understand that humans, in a way, use animals, but like, how was that for you? Like to make sense of all these things of like, cool, we are actually creating. We're playing a bit of God here, in for this, for our sake, because that's recent, right? When you said I don't know how many years that we have been engaging with dogs and animals, but breeding, it might be quite recent.
That's a good question. Basically, dogs in the first kind of 30,000 years self-domesticated. We weren't involved really in the process. They just got closer and closer into humans, a bit like seagulls and rats and those species that live around us, and cats that actually take advantage of the resources that we leave around, so all of those species have self-domesticated as well to some degree, and that's where the dog did. But then at a certain point, when they were literally in our villages and in our social groups and hunting with us, we started to already within a short amount of time divide into about 3 or 4 different breeds, so to speak. In other words, functions. They served functions. So we selected for the one that was the best hunter, and the one that was just great at guarding the village, and the one that was pulling the cart because he's a big strong dog. So the functional kind of aspects drove initially kind of subtle selection. But it wasn't till about 200 years ago when we had fences and cages and the ability to isolate.
200.
Yeah, about 100 to 200 years ago, where we started to, we actually divide off our breeding stock, because until you can do that, you can't have a pure line-bred animal, because they're all intermixing at all times. So at that point, we started to see the real breeds starting, and we've got 400 or 500 breeds now, and they have their own breed signature. If you look at the genome of the breeds, they have, might have 20 or 30 different genes that are different, significantly different, and they'll relate back to the function and purpose of heading dogs. Run and gather. I did my master's thesis on sheepdog behaviour and genetics, and so I was looking at the difference between the heading dogs, the ones that gather, like the border collies, and the hunterways that drive and bark. And of course, what it is it's truncated or modified hunting behaviour. And by cutting off the hunting sequence at different stages, you get the drive or the eye or the gather. So that's what we've done with our breeds. As you select for a heading dog like a border collie, they're a silent worker. They want to run together at the front. They're going to herd your motorbike and your car. They're going to, those are just innate behaviours within them that we've selected for. So that's what we've done, and so as it was driven by functionality, by what they do, that was one thing. But then, of course, humans being humans, fickle things we are, we started to select for dogs that fight and kill each other, for bull baiting, for just good looks, and once we started doing that, the real kind of health criteria to maintain a breed as a healthy animal became secondary. So now we've got these beautiful looking purebred dogs that are functionally terrible. When you look at the hypophagic, the dogs with the flat noses, they're very difficult to breathe. Their eyes are malfunctional. So we've now moved into an area where we're actually compromising the dog. And so, we try and clean up our act through the Kennel Association and those kind of organisations and tidy up the breeding. But yeah, we artificially selecting them. We're choosing what we want, and we work to do that. It's very much a human thing that we do across the species with domestic animals.
I guess that would also compromise their learning, because a human that is not breathing properly and has problems to see will have difficulties to learn. So I guess that makes everything harder, right?
Well, lots of ramifications, right through to physiologic issues, greater degree of cancer, greater degree of all different things that can come with that package. So, one of the things that, with the working breeds, at least they're much better at, is they know that the fundamental criteria of making sure you've got a healthy animal that's going to be low maintenance. You're not going to have to have it to the vet every week. For this, that, and another thing, and that it's similar to the prototype of a dog, which is the pariah dog. The interesting thing as the wolf co-evolved over that 30, 40,000 years, it came to become what is now the pariah dog. So if you've been in Bali or parts of India or mainly in the tropics, then those wild dogs that live around all the settlements, you know, and there's millions and millions of them, is the progenitor of the dog. That is actually the dog's true ancestor. And so it's a little a tan dog with a curly tail normally, upward pinné ears, and about 15 to 20 kilo. And so that's the archetypic dog, you know, that's what a real dog is. So if everything just got thrown, put your Rotties and your German Shepherds and your Poodles and threw them all in an area, came back 100 years later, they'll all look like that. There'll be a tan 15 to 20 kilo little dog with a curly tail. That's what the ancestral archetypic dog is. So that shows you what a dog should be. You know, it could go up to the size of a wolf. You know, but that's the range, and they should have a certain amount of agility, and they shouldn't have a flat nose. They need a long nose because they've got a massive olfactory system, and and don't muck with their ears either because they've got a fantastic oral system that hears much better than ours does. You know, so but we muck with those things, and then we muck with the dog, and then we've got a compromised dog like the bulldogs and some of the breeds that are shouldn't be selected really.
I like to ask you because I have a good friend of mine. Hello, James. He has two Staffords.
Staffordshire Bull Terriers.
Yeah, and he told me the original reason this was breeded, this kind of dog, was to warm the beds up. Is that right, or he was kidding me?
No, he's kidding you.
It's
a bit of a
it's not true.
What they were designed for was bull baiting,
all the time.
Bull baiting, bear baiting, and fighting, basically.
All right, okay.
So they mixed the bulldog with the
Stafford,
with terrier, Staffordshire Bull Terrier. Yeah, Staffy they're called.
Yeah, Staffy. Yeah, the Staffies.
But the good news about the Staffy is we've taken them away by selecting them over the latter 100 years, or because that was 1835, I think they stopped bull baiting, and that became illegal in England. So that cut that job out, and then they went to dog fighting and did that for a good while, and then they stopped that. And so then the Staffy became, actually, as they bred, a very good family dog and a very, very lovely friendly companion, very friendly. Unfortunately, they still have that predisposition. If you don't socialise them well through the formative period, they're going to be scrappy, potentially scrappy, and fight with other dogs, which is something they were selected for. So luckily, we've taken that selection and we've diffused that quite a bit. But they still do have, a pretty spunky nature, pretty. They're a terrier. They fight way above their weight range, lovely breed. But you do need to put some effort in to make sure you socialise them well in the formative period, and then you got a beautiful dog. Yeah.
What's the? Is there any history on like the oldest dog to live, like the one that lived the longest?
Is actually. There is just at the moment. There's one in Portugal at the moment who's 35 years, 35 years old, He's the oldest dog in the world at the moment, So, and still alive just at the moment. He looks like, to me, a Kelpie type, and so, which is probably, he'll be a working breed, because I had a working heading dog that lasted to 23, which is pretty amazing for a dog. And the oldest dog I ever had. 33 to 35, 34, I think. I can't remember what exactly, but up there. And dogs on average live 10 to 15 years, so that's, and that's, it's a sad thing. I've just come through in my old Reggie.
I wanted to ask you that, and so we can do like a segue before you tell your story of your recent, what happened to three of your dogs. I was wondering about that, like how interesting for humans to attach so much knowing that is an animal that has a time span there, like that has a lifespan. So can you tell me more about that attachment thing that I guess you work on yourself, and then tell a recent story that happened to you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a sad thing, isn't it, that they last such a short amount of time, 10 to 15 years, and it certainly is. I mean, one of the things that we have in our spiritual practices, ideally, is that we get to grips with the fact we're impermanent, and we're going to die, and so that's a big part of Zen practice, for example, and a lot of other practices, and so you're practicing, aren't you? Every time your dog dies, you're practicing impermanence. It's not a nice thing to practice. Grief is a tough thing. And having just lost Reggie and Monty, Reggie's the flying dog. He was the one I brought over from England. We rescued him out of England for the TV series and taught him to fly a plane. And he was the world's first flying plane, October 18th, 2015. Pretty amazing day. And he, so we brought him home. And so
after that, you gotta bring him home, right?
Exactly. He didn't fly it home, but he certainly flew home. And but he was one of those real special dogs. I mean, to fly a plane, I think he learned 180 different things. That he had to learn. God. So it's a pretty, just from putting a harness on to learning to deal with turbulence to there's a lot to it. We spent 10 months in that TV series training them to do a whole lot of other stuff. And then we got the top 3 dogs and spent another 2 months just focusing on training them to fly through using simulators and various other things. But he flew figure 8, for 15 minutes through 2 figure 8s up 3,000 feet by himself, doing it all by himself. So it was a pretty amazing feat. And so you get pretty attached, you can imagine, to that type of dog in particular. Same with Monty, the driving dog. He was the world's first driving dog, and he was an amazing rescue dog too. And Tommy was our little Jack Russell. So 6 months we lost all 3 of them, which was pretty difficult and challenging. And I've just written some stuff on that at the moment, just dealing with the grief of an animal. People often kind of underestimate it. When it happens to you, it can bowl people over, particularly people whose dog is a central part of their life. And so it's akin to family member, close family member dying, of course, and and the grief process is very similar. And Stefan can tell us more about that, no doubt, about dealing with that, no doubt, in your work. And I've done quite a bit of hospice work over the years as well, voluntarily. So I kind of have worked with that practice for many years, and but at the same time, it doesn't make it any really easier. It was still a lot of crying and a lot of because ashes are still sitting on the shrine with the other 2. We'll be doing a ceremony at some stage when when we can bring ourselves to walking down the Purina walkway that we used to walk every day, and we'll distribute the ashes through there. But it's a real challenge, when you lose them. This is the first time in my life I've been without a dog, so I feel quite undressed. I've got a clinic dog coming tomorrow, which will help a little bit. But you just realise just those little moments where. I can see it often with someone else rather than yourself, and I see Kim when she used to, swoop down and give him a big smooch, and she'd be laughing and giggling, and you just can't help it. You just in a good mood, aren't you, straight away? The old oxytocin's pumping, your dopamine's pumping, so you get those little hits all day from your little mate, as you cuddle up and you put your foot on him and you take him for a walk, and you forget that cumulative kind of effect and benefit of those beautiful little moments, are cumulative, and when they're gone, you actually miss them. They're quite probably, I'd say, to be honest, probably more so even than a human companion, your partner or your daughter because you actually interact with your dog a lot more, really, than you do with your child or meaning moment to moment. Every moment he's sitting beside you, he's following you somewhere, and he's doing something.
And
so
I'm a relationship counselor as well, and I'm saying in my sessions with couples, so something like unconditional love not existing except with the animal, the dog. The dog will love you unconditionally.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah?
Or the children. And
and the children.
The one with a partner, that it's a romantic dream. So we have to, there are conflicts, and we have to fill our love tank all the time up. But this what you
Definitely.
describe, it's kind of an unconditional love towards your dog, and the dog is loving you unconditionally. That makes it hard when
It's really
he's not
important.
here,
Yeah.
when he's going. Yeah.
And you see it in people, don't you? You know, who have bonded. You know, particularly people who are living on their own, or and their dogs, the central part of their life. You know, and you realise, you know, that is probably the only direct contact they have with unconditional love. You know, or they think that's the case.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah, it's a very powerful force, and it's a wonderful thing, because when we actually look at the side effects of the bond and the relationship with dogs, you know, we've done a lot of research on this now, and we know it has incredible. You know, most people who own a dog are considerably healthier than people that don't own a dog for lots of reasons. Most importantly, it keeps you out walking. It socially interacts you with lots of other people. It has those little stimulations, that little dopamine hit, and that oxytocin hit that happens regularly through the day. So all of those things actually benefit your mental health and your physical health greatly.
Brings meaning in your life.
Yeah,
Make your little friend happy.
Yeah.
And you see when he's happy, and you see when he's not happy. So, of course.
And for the kids, right, Stefan? I guess that's a big thing, right? when you have kids and you have a dog as well, like it extends that family bond.
Of course, it's wonderful, yeah. And
Definitely.
my son and my dog Walter, they are really buddies, so and play buddies. I hope I'm still the master of this tribe. Don't know if I'm the alpha dog, but they're still most of the time listening. But the play buddy, it's Tom, and if he needs to choose, I'm going with the master or with my play buddy. This teenage dog, it's listening to his energy of no, I need a play and I need to run now, and I go to my buddy Tom.
Definitely. Well, that relationship with kids is really amazing, because they also take on the responsibility partly of the dog, don't they? You know, so you start to see sometimes the first, you know, real compassion and empathy develop in kids towards their animals. You know, responsibility of feeding them and looking after them, and the animals, you know, are dependent on you, and so you know, a lot of those skills that you want to manifest out as with other humans,
Right.
Compassion, empathy, love, you know, care and attention and responsibility, all of those things are necessary when you own a dog and managing it well. And so, we've been designing a TV show that's, I don't know whether it'll happen yet, because COVID knocked it on the head a little bit, but where we work with teens or young people in need and difficulty, and we're using animals to training animals to get them through, you know. And we've done a couple of shoots on them already with a young woman who had who was socially phobic, and got her through training a dog, Leah Dale, and then she's now doing a degree at university, you know. So through the dog got her out there, you know, and so that's a series that we hope to do at some stage in the future. But those are the types of things we actually see, that the wonder and the beauty of that relationship, and how it can actually heal and grow and you know, improve the welfare and love within a family. Yeah.
Mark, different countries and different cultures will deal differently with what they got. So, for example, in Brazil, stray dogs everywhere, you know, and there's actually this joke of like, they are gangs, man. I'm not joking.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you see the pack and you're like, whoa, off they go, and they're so determined, you know, like they know where they're going, you know, like they're marching together, and they pack each other, like they're all, it's a gang.
Yeah. Well, they're the pariah dogs I'm talking about. Although they'll probably include all the breeds that are around as well. But
and there's this thing of a lot of people find that most of those mixed breeds, like that we call it stray, right? Sometimes they are a bit friendlier, or they are easier to deal with. I don't know if it's something because in the country there's a lot of dogs suffering, so when they see that someone pick them up, they will show a bit more appreciation. Is there any relationship between like being a pure breed and their intelligence level to one that is mixed?
Yeah, there is. There's a thing called hybrid vigor. Hybrid vigor, when you the problems with line breeding or pure breeding dogs is you decrease genetic variability when you line breed something. You know, when you want something, all the German Shepherds to look black and tan and be this size and behave like this, then you're decreasing their genetic variability. And when you decrease a population's genetic variability, you lose vigor. That means they're going to be less able to reproduce as successfully. They're going to have more problems. They're going to have behaviour problems. They're going to have physical problems. So hybrid vigor, when you've got the mutt, you know, the one that's mixed with all different things, they get the best of most things as a general rule. Not always. You can still get problems coming through. But so that's called hybrid vigor. So you definitely get that. But the other thing you get with the pariah dogs and the dogs that you're talking about, they do form packs. Dogs form different packs from wolves. So people often think that it's like a wolf pack. It's not like a wolf pack at all. The leader of the pack in a dog pack is the friendliest of the group. Whereas the leader in the pack of a wolf isn't necessary. It's more the alpha male or the alpha female, you know, and they'll be dominant over the pack. Whereas there's a kind of almost egalitarian kind of society in dogs, and as I said, led by the friendliest, the one that's got the more collaborations and the more relationships. And they still have a resource guarding potential, so they can still protect the food, you know, and things like that, and have fights over that type of stuff. But they're much more friendly with other dogs. They're much more friendly with humans. Mm-hmm. And they're always looking for opportunities to fit into a social group, and what you're talking about. So if in Brazil, you know, you take on and feed them even just part-time, well, bang, they're going to be at your door every minute you get home, and they might not be allowed inside, and they might not be, but they're going to be hanging around you because, you know, they know you're a sucker for punishment, and they'll keep working you. And but you know that's so you'll get a bit of that, but you also do get a level of packing sometimes between groups when there's the resources to guard, and they can fight over those, and they can be a little bit intimidating at times if they've got a resource they're guarding, but generally not, you know, compared to wolves, then not at all, you know. But yeah, you're right, and different cultures do see dogs completely differently. Cultures that don't have dogs as companion pets, you know, Indian culture, Chinese culture. I mean, this is changing, of course, rapidly in the modern era. But traditionally, you know, Indians, the broad Indian cultures across the, you know, because they have pariah dogs out there that they tend to, you know, have rabies, and a little bit more sceptical about dogs, and they didn't have them as pets really at the same level, the same as with the Chinese and with some of the Asian cultures. And so, although that's changing rapidly now, they're much more wary of dogs as a general rule. You'll see that. And dogs are much more wary of people who don't see them the same, you know. And so a culture who doesn't have dogs and doesn't have an empathy and cultural experience of dogs are going to be a bit more wary about dogs, as I said, often out of those rabies-based countries. So the dogs detect that very quickly. They can see that they're not relating in the same way, and so they'll discriminate against them. So it is about a matter of building, you know, our understanding culturally with dogs, and broaden that through the races and cultures that don't have that same rapport. And of course, it's important as a dog owner to make sure that you teach them to relate to those cultures and races that don't have that same sensitivity. So you go out of your way to socialise them, you know, with Asian culture and with Indian culture and with you know, whatever it is, and Polynesian and so on. So those cultures that have dogs in their natural, you know, ancestral kind of context, like the Polynesians do, have got a much better rapport with dogs as a general rule. But everyone can learn it, but it does take a little bit of time because that sensitivity is quite intuitive, you know.
Coming from Germany, I was surprised here. Maybe that's just a part of the Coromandel living with dogs. Our dogs in Germany, in Germany, the dogs are in the house overnight. They are part of the family. Even if there's a cage outside at night, they come inside. There's their little crate or whatever. There's a special place. And here in New Zealand or on the Coromandel, often they're kept outside of the house.
Yeah, it's more a rural kind of
more
rural
hunting dogs or
rural urban kind of. I mean, farmers hunters.
Yeah.
You know, those they tend to have their dogs in kennels,
Yes.
and they're working dogs, you know.
Working dog.
And so working dogs aren't treated like companion dogs as a rule quite the same. I mean, they still can be treated very well
Yeah.
and should be
Yeah,
treated
yeah,
very
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
But
Saying
but
this.
you're right, in Europe, and in particular in Europe, across Europe, you know, when we were doing the English show, you know, you'd be in the pub with your dog, you know, and there'd be dogs all over
Everywhere,
the
of
place,
course,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
So, you know, and that's something that New Zealand's moving towards. It's
Yeah.
been, but we're a wee bit more utilitarian and rurally based in terms of our ancestral way we deal with dogs, you know. So fundamentally they were working dogs, and that's where New Zealand kind of came as a, you know, as a culture that is largely rural and farm based in terms of its economy and so on. So, but that's changing rapidly, and we're much more now. Certainly, urban New Zealanders almost all have their dogs inside, and you know, most of the people that we deal with, you're dealing with indoor dogs. But there is still, you know, that aspect of the more utilitarian hunting and working dogs that have their kennels and live much more, you know, utilitarian kind of relationship.
Mark, are there any interesting facts when it comes to Aotearoa New Zealand history with dogs? Something to do with like with the Maori or when the English came that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, the kura, you know, which is kuri, the Polynesian dog that came with the Maori to New Zealand. So they had dogs and have had, you know, virtually from the start. They brought pigs and they brought a number of domestic species, but certainly the dog was a part of what they brought to New Zealand. And then, of course, you know, the early, particularly European settlers, you know, brought the border collies and the working breeds in particular first, then the hunting breeds as well. And so it was more, we did evolve probably through more of a utilitarian kind of practical working dogs, and then slowly as we became more urbanised and more westernised, you know, the dogs became much more companion animals, you know. So, and now the predominance probably is erring that way now. There's probably more companion animal dogs than there are working dogs. Although in New Zealand there's still a lot of working dogs because of the sheep farmers and cattle farmers, you know, most of them still have dogs. And although there's a bit of a movement towards motorbikes and things like that, which is a little bit sad. The horse and the dog are kind of taking second place a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it true that pigs are more intelligent than dogs?
Pigs?
Pigs, yeah.
Pigs are very intelligent, but I trained 20 pigs for Hercules, a series called Porcules, and so I know pigs well. And I trained a pig to ride a horse and to do a whole scene, you know, galloping through the bit, and it was probably a good point to show the difference between a pig and a dog. So I trained this little pig to ride on the horse and ride through set. You know, he was Porcules, so he was Hercules, got turned into a pig. So he was Porcules, and we had to have 18 of them or 20 of them, So we trained this one to ride through the set, and that was all good. And they're really easy to train, and that's all good. So he's riding through, and there's a garden over this side, which I'd planned nicely just to be shielded by a couple of trees. And he's galloping through, and everything was right, directed aside to turn the set round and ride from the other way. And he said, it shouldn't make any difference to you, should it? And I said, well, it is going to make a difference. He's now going to be riding right past the garden, you know. And he said, well, so what? I said, well, he's a pig, you know, and he's working for me because I got the food and the clicker over here. And if you've got, all those garden food in there, it's going to be tough. And we got one shot through that way. He didn't notice the garden on that one. Then when he noticed the garden, he was off the bloody horse in 10 seconds and into the garden, and that was the end of the scene, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with pigs. They got a high food drive, such a high food drive that if there's anything in the way that can be construed as food, then the work's over because he'll be going to have a munch. So whereas dogs, you know, once you can use food as a facilitator to train, and then you can wean them off the food work, and then it won't matter, you know, whereas the pigs never weaned off the food work. They're always looking for food. But they are a very intelligent animal, and they can do some things that dogs can't do, and there's quite a lot dogs can't do that they can do. But they've got a very similar kind of sense of smell too.
Nice.
They can pick up cancers, and they can pick up all different things like dogs can, because they've got great sense of smell.
Right. You've been to some amazing film productions, some big ones. Can you tell me some of the coolest, nicest things and challenging things that you don't want to go through again, but it's just part of the job?
And can I just add as well? You mentioned Lord of the Ring. You did some work with that as well. And
we did Lord of the Rings and Narnia and Last Samurai and lots of the big movies.
Wow.
Last Samurai we did down with Tom Cruise. So that was a pretty cool movie, and I think we trained about 150 animals for that. So it was a big movie.
Which sorts of animals?
Everything from cats to horses to cattle to pulling carts on big beasts and wagyu cattle, and it was quite a scene. I can tell you there was a lot to do. And I had this one little heading dog, the one I told you about, 23, Jess, who lasted till 23. Tom Cruise fell in love with her because when we're on set, you're when you're doing that, moving chickens and geese, and I mean it was a huge. The scenes that I'm talking about were villages with animals all over the place, and so we'd work the chickens and the ducks and the geese and whatever else there was, maybe 50 birds, kind of move them in front of Tom. And then he'd be standing up and he'd do his big blurb, and slowly the chickens and things would move away and just look like they were just there normally, But it's all orchestrated, Wow. So I've got this heading dog that'll run around and gather whatever I ask her to gather up. And it can be the chickens, ducks, geese. They're all different. When you're working different species, they're completely different to work for a dog, And so she would whip round and gather them up and bring them up in front of him. And it became automatic for her. She knew what the job was, and she'd go around and round them all up and bring them up and be ready as soon as she heard the calls, There's a number of calls in filming, obviously everyone knows action, but there's a whole lot of preceding wind-up kind of cues that tell us, the film's rolling, the sound's rolling, So she knew all those sounds, and so she knew exactly the cue when she would whip around, bring them up, and Tom was standing there one day and he said, "I love that bloody chicken whippet. I want to take that chicken whippet home."
Yeah.
I said, "You ain't taking my chicken whippet nowhere, baby."
Right. It's my friend.
Yeah.
You can have a lot of things, but you cannot have it all, Mr. Tom.
So he was, so we had a lot of fun with that, and so it was a great movie. We did a lot of Lord of the Rings. We did. Actually, you might remember the Bugger Dog. I don't know whether you remember. Maybe you guys weren't in New Zealand when that was the series. In fact, if you watch the Toyota ad, still they do the Bugger Dog. He lands in the mud and says Bugger. That was an ad that we did back in 20 years ago, I suppose, Kim, wasn't it? And it was and saying Bugger was a huge thing at the time, and it became a whole political thing between Australia and New Zealand and blah blah blah. Anyway, it got accepted and we did it, and it became Ad of the Year and Dog of the Year and all that type of stuff. And but that dog became Lord of the Rings dog, so we trained him for a big scene on Lord of the Rings, so that was a really cool scene. And those kind of... Narnia was a really great movie. We trained mice to chew the ropes off Aslan, with a lion when he was tied, and we had 200 mice climbing up ropes and eating ropes and all on cue, and trained birds, we trained hawks, we trained, you name it. We worked with lions, we worked with, lots of different species through that, and wolves. Wolves was the main one on that. Narnia, was it? Yeah, wolves. So we had a zoo at the time, and a rescue zoo out in Bombay. And so we brought the wolves in for that job, and there was 10 wolves, and big scene and a year's work, and nearly $1 million to bring them in.
Where they came from?
From America,
From America.
And so that was a big scene. I remember the scene in the beaver den, in that where the wolves are trying to kill the beavers, and that was all highly trained, highly difficult stuff to do. And but amazing, great to work with wolves again. It was a highlight, in film work. And so lots of different big movies and our own TV series, and where we obviously have lots of animals on those that we have to wrangle and train. And
Are you still involved with film if it's something that comes to
yeah,
you?
we are. Yeah. So Rosie runs the film side of the business now. I've kind of pulled out of that by moving down to Hotwater Beach. It means you've got to be accessible
who
to.
is Rosie?
Rosie's one of my senior trainers too.
Senior
yeah,
trainer,
yeah. So
not your daughter.
No, that's Jasmine. Yeah,
That
yeah,
is
Jasmine. She's
okay.
up in Mangawai.
Yeah.
But no, Rosie's does the has been involved in the animal training with me in the film side, and we had a whole team of up to 22 at one stage.
Wow.
When we were on Samurai, we had 22 trainers, working, and so those jobs were big jobs, and we still do some big ones, and but it's a pretty demanding thing, kind of sometimes 18-hour days, and it's just like it's tough work. And the reason we got into it was because there was some what I considered malpractice going on in the film industry at the time. Back when I did The Piano, actually, it was the first movie I did, and
cool.
So there was problems there. So we went in and troubleshoot it, to really just help them out, and then ended up doing it because they didn't know what they were doing, and then suddenly we're doing another big job and another big job, and that's how we kind of got drawn in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we also got very involved in the welfare of the animals on film,
Fantastic.
And so we we worked closely with the welfare organisations and making sure that animals are looked after when they're on film, and set good regulations and so on. So we've worked on that quite a bit over the years as well, just to make sure it's. So we always try and rescue animals for film. So we rescue them, train them, get them into the right, into a good state, and then we rehome them.
Yeah.
So we try and take advantage of the opportunity to give an animal another good life. Yeah.
Congratulations on doing that. That's decent.
It's
That's
nice.
amazing.
It's nice to do when you can do it. Yeah. Mm.
Did you want to say something, Taylor?
I just got curious. Mark, you were talking about bringing wolves from America
Yes.
to do the movie. What happened to them after that?
They go back. We actually tried to keep a couple of them, but because we had a zoo and it was we had the facility there, and we had them in our zoo for 8 months, so we got pretty attached to them. And but yeah, they got another big job, unfortunately, and the two that we were hoping to keep had to go. So yeah, that was a sad day. But so they went on to do another big job in Africa, actually. So they headed off for their next big job, and 8 of them were hybrid wolves with hybridized with Malamutes. Malamutes are the big husky dogs, and so they were massive, and even bigger than the normal, because we had 4 wolves as well, and so they were massive animals. And when you're working with them on set, it's a different animal. They're not a dog, and we used to wear chainmail gloves, because we clicker trained them. But you see me clicker training with this and a little piece of kibble, or cheese, or dog roll. Whereas with wolves, you're using a chicken leg, and you've got your hand in a glove, a male glove hand, so you can't, because when you deliver the click and the food reward, the wolf will just about take your hand off, so you've got to be damn careful when you're working with them. And so we would wear chainmail gloves to make sure our hand didn't go down their gullet as well.
Have you had any experience that it was scary, that you were almost...
we did, yeah. We had. I mean, one of the problems when you're working with wolves is and this was at the back at the facility. We were doing a demonstration there and just introducing people to the wolves and doing stuff with them. And so it was kind of an educational thing. And then we finished, and everyone got kind of all playful and kind of lost attention. A couple of the trainers that weren't focused on what was going on. So someone screamed and ran, and just joking, and the wolves launched after them. But luckily, what happens is they've got a boxer who's the dominant dog. The boxer's this high, and the wolves are this high. And this boxer is the boss of the pack, and that's how they manage the pack, by managing the boxer, And so luckily managed to put the boxer straight into the situation, and he diverted what could have been a packing situation, and what you don't want in a wolf pack is a packing situation, where you get 10 wolves diving on someone. It's not an ending you want to see. And when you're working with wolves, when I did my research up in Wolf Park in Indiana, when I was doing my master's work, there was very strict rules about going into the pack, you know, and you weren't allowed to be injured, you know. And one of the PhD students failed to follow the rules and went in with an injury and just about had her arm ripped off. And so there are things that you've got to be careful, you know, when you're working with species that can kill you. And when they pack, you do not want to be, you know, at the bad end of that. So, yeah, you got to keep your wits about you. A lot of what we did on that movie, we used to move the wolves around the country in big horse trucks. We had a zoo license because you had to be a zoo all the way wherever you were. You had to set up a zoo, basically, and for permitting and stuff. And so then we'd have big pens outside, and then we'd work them from there out into whatever we were doing, the forest or whatever. And but with that mobile zoo, you know, so we were working with them day in and day out, obviously. And there's always, you know, you always got to have your wits about you, you know. It can be a really dangerous situation. Same with working with big cats, you know. They can kill you, you know, as quick as look at you. So there's a lot of there's a lot of understanding and care and knowledge and planning and all of that goes into managing those big sets, you know, and you're under the pressure of the director, you know, who wants everything, you know, and you want to make sure the animals' rights and welfare is looked after. So you're always working on that, you know, on that face between them wanting to push you too far and you wanting to put your foot down, you know. So it's an important responsibility to realise one good thing about being on set: you are the one that calls the final tune, and so the director can't make you do anything. At the end of the day, if you say it's no, you know, and you have to have the ability to say it's no because the directors are big, tough, pushy buggers, if I'm being blunt, and very creative. But they don't normally have a great deal of awareness of the animal's limitations, you know. So that's your job, to be, you know, the animal's guardian.
Wow, fascinating stories. I'm asking myself all the time, who is the man, Mark Vette? What is behind all the stories? Why can he be so good? Because, of course, obviously, you found your inner calling, you found your passion, you are working. That is probably no work for you to be together, to create a working relationship with all sorts of different animals. You have, of course, kind of a goal, what needs to be happen if you work for with big film production together. And but who is the man behind not the facade? Because I believe you need to be really authentic, working with animals. There needs to be kind of an energy exchange over a frequency we won't see, we can't see even with our eyes. It goes in the quantum physics, in the sense that the dog or the other animals, he's a good one. He's one of us. He isn't maybe even nature like us, so he's not the big boss. He is he is our friend. We can trust him.
Trust is the
we can
the
trust
word.
him. So we follow him because we can trust him.
The first thing you're doing with any animal relationship is you're building trust. If you haven't got trust, you've got nothing, obviously.
So obviously you trust yourself as well.
Yeah, you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust your intuition and your knowledge. You know, you need to understand the species well. Whenever I work, I mean, I just think about taught an octopus to take a photo. You know, so you can imagine an octopus 600 million years ago, we were related. So we diverged 600 million years ago from octopi. And so when you think about that, you know, and you know, they're a highly intelligent animal. And so I got given this brief, so we want an octopus to take a photo of a family, you know. And okay, well, I better go and do some homework on octopuses, hadn't I? And I did love octopus, so it was a good challenge. But so what that takes is you've got to get inside the head. Remember, they've got 9 brains in an octopus. They've got a brain in every leg and a brain in the head. And all of those brains are interlinked in a completely different way from any of our neurological system. And they're genetically, they've got more genes, much more genes than we've got. They've got a whole lot of things that exceed humans considerably. And we didn't know. No one had ever trained an octopus. So, do they learn the way dogs learn? Do they learn the way, you know, what do they learn the way anything learns? And they don't really learn the way dogs learn. But we taught them, you know, so we taught this octopus to come cue him into the camera, get him to push his tentacle down a tube and push the button and take a photo of the family on cue with on a sound tone, you know, and he did that, probably photographed about 30, 40 families that day. But the probably the crux of that story was the biology of an octopus. Is we were training 3 or 4 of them, and the main hero, one that I'd mastered it and had done it well and everything was going good. Unfortunately, the day before we started shooting, she laid eggs. Now, some people probably think, oh, well, she lays eggs. Unfortunately, when an octopus lays eggs, it's going to die from that point on, you know. So that's the end of their life as soon as they lay their eggs. So they start to deteriorate in front of you. Not a great thing when you're just about to do a film shoot tomorrow with having trained them to do this. So, of course, we just thought, oh, well, that's that. You know, we're gone. That's all over. But the good news is the other 2 that I was training had been watching. And believe it or not, what took me a month and a half, 2 months to train the main octopus, these guys have been watching. We're doing a little bit of work with them, but not much. Picked it up in a day, bang, did the job the next day. Like mimic, you know, like no other species I've seen, you know. Yeah. And I never expected that at all. No one expected that, you know. And so we completed the shoot with the bee octopus, and she went on to live a reasonable life and a longer life, and I learned a lot about octopus. So I think the thing is, I love the challenge to understand how species learn, how they communicate. So if you're a zoologist and you're really interested in how they, how they've evolved and adapted to the world, and how they, what their amazing strengths and weaknesses are, and then I taught pukekos. I remember the Genesis ad where the pukekos turn the lights on and all that type of stuff. Well, pukekos are a highly trainable bird, We didn't know that till we started, and similarly with parrots, they're highly trainable as well. So, you get to some species and they can really work beautifully and are great to train. Hawks were very difficult to train, so, and I mastered a different technique from the old hawk techniques, because I find it inhumane to teach them the old school way. So I clicker trained my hawks, and they went really well. But all species are different, and not a lot of them are necessarily motivated to do what you want them to do.
But again, Mark, I come back to my question: who is Mark? When did you discover this gift? How was your childhood? Was you as a little boy already with animals surrounded?
It was.
Did you feel that they understand me and I understand them?
Yeah.
What was your first dog? Was there something?
German Shepherd.
Here we go.
6 years old.
Here we go.
Trained my first German Shepherd at 6 years old, and I wouldn't say it was the most successful training job, but what it did do, it made me realise how damn difficult, because he was a rescue shepherd, he chased cats and did a whole lot of other things, and so I learnt the hard way, because he was just so challenging. Yeah. But I did have a grandfather who was a military dog trainer, so he and he lived with us at that time, so he taught me to train Scott, and so Scott was my first dog. And I've always had, lots of different animals. I've lived in the States, snakes and spiders and monkeys and you name anything and everything. Yeah. Had a zoo with lions and everything, all different monkey species and so on. So I just love, the diversity of species, the wonder of understanding a species, and then the wonder of building a relationship with individuals. It's just a beautiful thing, and it takes out, all the human ego, bullshit, if I'm putting it bluntly. We have a lot of stuff around us in our human behaviour that's, extra to necessary, whereas when you're working with an animal, it's just the truth, it's the present moment, it's and depending on the species and what's going on often, and you bond well, unconditional love, and it's a beautiful thing to have, whether it's a horse or an elephant or a donkey they've all got their own little idiosyncrasies and their own way of training, and And so, I love that stuff, and that's something I'm writing on into the future as other species too.
So, wow, we can stay here for hours. So we would love to have you back when the new book is out. Can you, before we wrap it up, can you just tell us a little bit on where to find the books and who should go for like each one of them, like specifically?
Yeah, so Dogs Ends, the first book that I wrote, and so this gives you a
little bit higher. Oh, I can do it if you don't mind. I'll hold it. Yeah, thank you.
And that gives that book's really about gives you the ancestry origins of the dog, the co-evolution story, and it's drawing on one of the things that's difficult with dog behaviour is it's a massive literature out there, and for most people it's pretty, difficult to make your way through it. So that's very much, a review of the general literature and dog learning, and but it's really based around the 45 years of clinical work, and so that's for older dogs. So that's the dog 2 years on, and it's focused around behaviour problems, the 10 main common problems: dog aggression, human-oriented aggression, hyperactivity, destructive behaviour, and so on. So that covers all of those, and there's the virtual school, Dogs In Adult Virtual School, is based on that book, and so that's got 100-odd videos of me taking you through every step through the different aspects of treating and resolving problems in adults. Puppies In was the book that came after this. I wrote a chapter in there on puppy behaviour, but we realised that, of course, this is the time when you make and break your dog. Prevention's better than cure. And so in this book, it's about really spelling out. You can see the little green, and if you look on the side of it, you can see that green on the actual side. I'll just pass it
on the side here? Sorry.
So if you look at that green part there, so that there is, that part of the book is week by week, taking you through step by step the 8 most important things you need to do every day or within the week.
How good.
And so what you're trying to do with that, and with that part of the book, it's the start of the guide that the virtual school takes you through, which is, right, now you've got your pup, let's start today, and this is what we need to do. And so I take you through videos about, as I'm training 2 border collies and a cavoodle and a bull terrier and a number of other dogs, puppies. So I take you through that formative period, and that actually got created with Kim and I through right at the start of the COVID lockdown. So we were with Tara actually, and she had 2 dogs that needed to go, 2 border collies that needed to go to Christchurch, and couldn't go. So we took them on, and we trained them through that formative period and filmed the step by step. And then we've gone on to do a number of other ones. So that tells that story of that book, and it's got both books have got, and including the Teenage Puppies In, have a community, a closed Facebook community of about 1,000 families, and that's just amazing kind of, relationships and synergy and sharing in those communities, which is really what we love. That's the best part of it. And so everyone gets to share and talk about their experiences and even share their knowledge, and we moderate that and answer all the questions, do a once a week Facebook Live for each of the schools on a Tuesday night. And so, it's a very supported community. And then behind that, we have virtual consults and a clinic. So what happened when we did the first TV series Funny Farm, there was a big demand for our work. Then we did Pound Pups to Dog Stars, which went global, and into 120 countries. And so that became even more crazy, you can imagine. And so we just couldn't fulfill the need for people to try and solve the problem. So we wrote those books and then built the school. And so we've tried to establish an education platform, an international education platform, so we can share our knowledge and share the community, and most importantly, get pups through that formative period.
Thank you for that.
And a beautiful memoir here.
Yeah, and then a memoir. Yeah, so that's more about those stories that I've been telling. From Tom Cruise to Xena, warrior princess, getting 100 rats in a We got had to put 100 rats, train 100 rats to work with her in a sewer, and anyway, there's a story there behind that. Lucy Lawless, she'll probably kick me for telling that story, but she's. But yeah, there's lots of fun stories in there, the flying dogs and all those things. But it also, that's Scott. That's the first one. Oh no, that's Tammy. No, that's another one that I had.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's me. When I was at university, actually, started university.
Okay.
But so I had 2 shepherds at that stage too. So and the memoirs are very much also kind of the relationship between my Zen practice and working with animals. So
Wow.
So that's kept us out of trouble. Now we're on to Teenage Puppy Zen and a Dharma book, a Zen book. Yeah.
Fantastic. Last question. What are humans going to regret in the future when it comes to the way that we deal with animals and look after them?
Oh, that's a good question. What are we going to regret in the future? I mean, I think one of the things that we do realise is that they're an integral part of our communities, and it's very easy to make. If we're talking about dogs in particular, it's very easy to make dogs the enemy. Kick them off the beaches, kick them out of here and there, stop them from doing this, stop them from doing that. But when we really look at what dogs contribute to our culture and our communities, police dogs, guide dogs, detection dogs, there's just so many things. Therapy dogs at all different levels. You might remember back to Funny Farm, but we used to train, we did an epilepsy dog, we've taught the first dog to find curry dieback. So these dogs actually function and contribute to our culture, in so many ways that, those are very obvious and overt ways. But we've been talking about, the relationship of our kids growing up and building, responsibility and compassion and empathy. So the biggest thing that we can do is detach ourselves from nature. Really dogs and cats and those pets that we have are the last vestige of nature in our lives, in many of our lives. I mean, some of us are lucky enough to go beyond that and have, other animals and interact with nature in a deeper way. But it's very much the canary in the cave. If we lose our animals and the diversity of animals, we'll die. I mean, we're goners. We are interdependent, completely interdependent. If we're not looking after them, and they die, we die. It's as simple as that. And so I think one of the big lessons in our life, I'm sure, and I say no, this is a very deep Zen practice, is interdependence. Everything is interdependent. This sheet of paper, doesn't exist in itself. That is a tree, a truck that's carried the tree to the plant, the person who cut it down, the sun, the water, so if we can't wake up to the fact that we're all completely interdependent, and if we don't start acting collaboratively and cooperatively and compassionately, we're goners. Well, we know that from climate change. What have we just experienced here in Coromandel the last little while? Our roads are all down in the rivers below, aren't they? We need to start really understanding that we're an integral part of it, and if we don't act like that, there won't be anything left.
How about that for an ending, Mr. Stefan?
Oh my God, yeah, it's a deep ending, and it's true. I completely agree.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Stefan.
So cool,
Thank
man.
you, Leah.
Yeah.
Great. And I must also mention I've got a Brazilian son-in-law.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear, man.
So I know all about you.
Oh, man, nobody's perfect. Hey, shit.
I love Brazil. What Amazonia? What a place. Eh?
What a place. I hope we keep that place.
Yeah, well, there's a place we need to keep.
Yeah,
the lungs of the world.
Yeah, we had a big threat with the last president, and now we're hoping that things line up again. And we, as you said, it's an essential thing for us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for this, man. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Leo. Lovely to be here. Look forward to doing another one together.
Yes.
And lovely to meet you, Stephen.
Lovely meeting
We look forward
you.
to doing some meditation together.
Okay, we do. Okay.
And for a jam
Cheers,
as well,
man.
right?
Yeah, and
For
a jam.
boogie?
You bet.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mr. Stefan, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Now I caught you, so I might bring you back again, right?
if you have so interesting, wonderful people like him, and I'm sure you
He's
will
picky
have
and
some,
choosy.
Yeah, it sounds like a challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Kim, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks,
Mr.
Kim.
Taylor, thank you. And for you watching us at home, make sure to be back on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 p.m. live stream on YouTube. And then we upload all the shows on all the audio platforms. It's been a pleasure. Peace. Bye.